Welcome. Cybersecurity and zero trust are top of mind as we begin the new year. They depend increasingly on organizations being able to have very, very tight control over who's on the network and who's not, what they can do, what their privileges are. For government agencies, that also means deploying more effective ways to protect users from having passwords and credentials compromised by the bad guys. I'm Francis Rose with Scoop News Group, talking with George Duchak. He's the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Logistics Agency. George, welcome. It's good to see you again. How has the cybersecurity executive order from the White House impacted the way that you are doing cybersecurity, thinking about zero trust at DLA? Welcome, George.
Well, great to see you again, sir, and appreciate you having me on. So the zero trust architecture is something that DoD is focused on right now, as you're well aware of, and that was even before the 12 May executive order. Actually, Forrester, going back about a decade or so, is one who pretty much coined the term, and it's an approach to cybersecurity that's kind of a reframing of our mental model from the traditional perimeter defense, create the moat, have the bad guys try to get past the moat, and it's a mental shift in our thinking that will, in all likelihood, manifest itself into new processes and technologies. And there are really just three broad tenets of it. One is to never trust, but always verify. Second is to implement least privilege, and the third is to assume breach, assume the bad guys are in there. So we're big fans of what this is doing with their Thunderdome project for zero trust, and we have high hopes that probably somewhere around the beginning of next summer or early part of June, July, we should be able to start adopting their solution. So zero trust has been in the works well before the EO, but the EO makes a nice forcing function to get organizations to move more quickly in that direction. I think the big misperception is, though, that most folks think that it's some sort of an appliance that you put on your network and it's going to stop the bad guys. It's not. It's a mental model change. And traditionally, if you think about the way we did security in the past, the unit of trust or the unit of security was the IP address. We put up this moat and we allowed certain IP addresses in, other ones we kept out. So the IP address is the unit of control for security is being replaced by identity being the unit of control or trust for cybersecurity. And now we try to make sure we know who, the identity of the humans, the machines, and the connections, and how all those interact. So right now at DLA, we're really enmeshed in our first major modernization in 20 years. We call it digital business transformation. And it's getting us to relook and rethink our business processes, procedures, or value proposition and such. And part of that remaking of our IT infrastructure is to adopt this zero trust mantra and zero trust architecture. We're developing our own software factories, DevSecOps, to build in security from the beginning, and we're creating personas for our users. So when they sign on, the persona is based on the role that they have. So it limits what systems and where they can go to in the network, so they don't get the broad accesses. So I guess that's pretty much it. The old thinking is to protect the network. The new thinking is to protect the data on that network. And so this whole idea of zero trust is creating that trust contract between the people, the machines, and the connections.
So what's the intersection, George, of that new way of thinking about doing away with the moat model and an announcement like we saw recently, the Pentagon's extending maximum telework at least through January because of the virus? You have people now that are widely dispersed working from a number of different locations. And I wonder what the implication of that is for the kinds of security efforts that you're undertaking.
Yeah. Telework is here to stay. In fact, everything you read and hear about is about the new hybrid work as a output, not a place. And I think the federal government and DoD as well will adopt a model that is different than what we had in the past. So that invokes some additional security requirements that we have with our telework workforce. We're going to be using equipment that is not necessarily within our purview or our control, meaning your home router, your home networks. And I will guarantee you that your home network is not nearly as secure as our DoD information network, as secure as our We have to look at ways of making sure that that connection between where you're at, your home, and our network is secure. And you call it multi-factor authentication. We really just do two-factor authentication now. We use a CAC and a PIN, something you have and something the PIN as the two-factor authentication. But we've also used a couple of other things at DLA. We use a VPN like most organizations, and then we have a virtual desktop infrastructure. So your terminal at home really is nothing more than a dumb terminal that looks just like you would if you're sitting at your desk at the office, albeit with some latency considerations because of the network, and sometimes the user's bandwidth, they don't have high bandwidth offering, and that induces some other latency too. So,
what are you seeing regarding the way that people are interacting with the security efforts? The term that I keep hearing is human-centric cybersecurity, and its impact in the way that organizations plan and defend against ransomware, phishing attacks, those kinds of things, George.
Yeah, the weakest link in any security system is always the human. It's the wetware, and you mentioned phishing, and phishing is a big is the FBI reported that it's the largest single attack vector. About 35-ish% of all attacks originate with some sort of phishing campaign. And at DLA, we do a monthly either phishing, spear phishing, or whaling tournaments, where we cleverly craft some emails to try to educate our users, because if they get an email, they click on the link, then it'll pop up and say, well, this is what you should have looked for, it was wrong. But phishing is just wildly successful because it exploits an innate human either flaw or feature that we want to trust. I could Google Francis Rose and find out some things about you, and now craft an email saying, I'm a student at American University, second-year journalist student, and I'm a big fan of your book. I've watched your television shows, I listen to your podcast, and I read you religiously. I'm putting together an audition tape, and I wish I would really value your critique and input of how I'm doing, because you're such a luminary in the area, and I would very much appreciate it. And I guarantee you, because you're a nice person, you want to help somebody, you'd probably say, oh, here's a young journalist student that could use some guidance and help. You have that trust gene that all humans do. You'd say, okay, I'm going to help this person. And you'd probably click on that link, and it may legitimately go to some video of somebody trying to do an audition. But there's also some other undocumented features that come along with that video, and all of a sudden you find out your network, or your system, then your network, has been pwned by an adversary. So,
don't give anybody any ideas, first of all, George. I like to think I would respond the right way in that situation, but you may have gotten me there. What are you doing at DLA regarding passwords or access to the networks? You mentioned the CAC card and the PIN. There have been various discussions over the last 5 years for CAC cards to disappear, but that access idea is still tremendously important, and it's a key part of that zero trust architecture we've been talking about.
Yeah, in general, very little. That's an area that I really do think needs some more attention. A few years ago, we implemented a app called KeyPass, K-E-E, not K-E-Y Pass, as a kind of a password vault for folks. But largely, it's still the two-factor authentication that just uses your CAC, your password. So something you have, something you know. I'd like to get to the third thing in multi-factor. It's something you are, which is either facial recognition or a thumbprint or some other sort of biometric. I recently read an article that if you look on the dark web, there are roughly 1,200 offerings of kits that allow you to bypass two-factor authentication, meaning that I could go there, buy it, and I could use it to use a man-in-the-middle attack and get through your two-factor authentication, which kind of tells you that no matter what you do, it seems like the criminals are always one step ahead of you. So now that we know that you could be owned by by buying the kit and getting past two-factor. Now we need to start moving toward multi-factor. And I think you've hit on something that we probably should be spending a little bit more attention on.
George, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
As always, thank you, sir.